Hello and welcome to SLP Full Disclosure. I am your host, Jennifer Martin, and joining me today is Stephanie Michele Sweigart. And we are going to be talking about something that I feel like is always pertinent and important, but I feel like especially now as it comes to spring, it's just a nice reminder of compassionate communication practices. And before I introduce and tell you a little bit more about Stephanie Michele, I want to just shout out our sponsor and introduce our sponsor and tell you a little bit about AM Passport app. So on this app, you can find, book, and manage all of your travel assignments. And it's kind of one-stop shopping. So learn more at amnpassport.com. And again, that is amnpassport.com. And now I would love to introduce our guest, again, Stephanie Michele Sweigart. And she is a speech language pathologist who founded Golden State Speech Pathology Services Incorporated. She earned her undergraduate degree and master's degree from Bloomsburg University in Pennsylvania. And Stephanie Michele has experience working in hospitals, providing speech and swallowing assessments and therapy in the acute care setting, and has also provided early intervention therapy to students in their home, as well as to public schools, charter schools, and non-public school students. She also supervises SLP graduate clinicians during their clinical fellowship, as well as SLPAs. And if that's not enough, in addition, Stephanie Michele is a certified mindfulness meditation teacher. She is a certified CE provider in California and has created Golden State of Mind professional development that focuses on the clinician. So welcome, Stephanie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jennifer, for having me. I love that I have an opportunity just to share, like you said, this stuff that's needed now more than ever, compassionate communication with all of your listeners. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like this is something that I think would be invaluable in every single piece of our lives, but really and truly as we are communication experts. And so I do think this fits so nicely, not only within our discipline, but in many others. So glad you are here and that you have this expertise. So, okay. One of the questions I always just love to ask and get started with is, tell us about your professional journey. You've obviously had and done a lot of things within your career thus far. So tell us a little bit about how it started and where you're at now.
Well, how it started. My story's an interesting. I'm like, is my story appropriate for this podcast? No, I became an SLP because of wine, lots and lots of wine. But no, seriously, I was actually in a different undergraduate program. I was in a communication. I was getting ready to graduate in a studies for communication, but for broadcast television and journalism. And I loved editing. And I was at the University of Scranton in Pennsylvania, where I think the Office is filmed.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I was going to school there, and I was going to be graduating a semester early in December. But that summer, before I was going to graduate, I just saw, I think in one of the cafes, a posting for an opportunity to study abroad. There were 500 students that were going to be taken from all over the United States over to London, England, for an intercultural communication course. And I thought, well, this sounds pretty awesome. I want this opportunity. So I signed up and I was able to participate in that. And my first time out of the country, I was 22 years old. I was of wine drinking age, and I got over there and I'm navigating my way around the Heathrow airport. And I see one other person who looks like maybe they're a student from the US. I don't know, because they look lost too. And they kind of are mirroring my actions. And her name was Sarah, and I wish today, if she's listening to this, that she would reach out to me. I've tried to find her on social media because it was one of those serendipitous moments. She's changed the course of my entire life. I don't know her last name, but long story short, we were both trying to find where we needed to meet up to take the van to the university for this course, and she was coming from the Midwest or somewhere in the South. So we get to orientation, and that particular night, we had a free night. We were allowed to go out and do whatever we wanted to do. And her and I kind of buddied up since, we kind of met and formed that relationship in the airport. And we buddied up and sort of toured around London at night. And we hit a couple different bars and pubs, and we were having a great time. And I remember I said to her at one point, I was across the table, there was really loud music playing. And I said, what are you going to school for? And I remember it as clear as day, like it was yesterday. And it's been 22 years or so now. And she says, speech pathology. And I'm like, what's that? I'd never heard of that, which I think is a lot of people that had never heard of speech pathology until they did. And I just remember, this is the clearest day picture, I just remember her kind of pointing to her mouth. Again, it was hard for me to hear. And her saying, like how you say the S sound, you have to move your tongue. And I was like, whoa, that's cool. It was so interesting to me. And I thought, I want to know more about this. And I don't know if it was just my first time out of the country and I was in this new place with amazing architecture and my independence and I was running around and we were having wine, or if it really was speech pathology. But in that moment, something clicked because the next day they separated all the 500 students. I never saw her again. I completed the program, came back to the U.S., but that little golden nugget stuck in my head, so much so that I did all the steps necessary to research and shadow people in the field and investigate so that by the time I graduated that December, so after that summer program, I was already preparing to go back to school to do the undergraduate work for speech therapy. Never saw her again. I want to tell her she changed my whole life. So Sarah, if you're out there and you're an SLP somewhere, thank you, because that's how my journey in the field of speech pathology started.
Okay, that is exactly why I love that question so much, because I'm just kind of like, what? Oh my gosh, I feel like we could do a whole episode just on that. But I mean, it is so incredible, isn't it? How one person can kind of change that trajectory. I mean, I had a similar experience with getting into this field. So you just, hearing that, working on the S, you started to look in and say, okay, well, and looked into it and then realized there was more to it. And then that was enough to just send you down that path.
Send me down that path. Yes, I shadowed an SLP that was at my sister's hospital who was in the acute care center. So I shadowed a medical side, and then I got a position as a paraprofessional from December until I would go back to school in the fall as a one-to-one. So I paid close attention to the SLP that came into the special education room I was working in. So I feel like I really did my homework and I wasn't just jumping into something new. I was just fascinated by the field and I felt very drawn to it.
Yeah, that is incredible. Yes, Sarah, if you were in London, England, reach out to us and we're going to have Stephanie's information in the show notes, because I would love nothing more than an update that you all connected. That would be
amazing.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so then you're, going down this road of speech pathology, you finish. You obviously have done a lot within your career as a speech pathologist, including now, having your own company. So walk us through how did you go from there to really having this expertise and in compassionate communication and becoming a certified mindfulness meditation teacher? How does that happen?
Well, they say that every challenge we go through is an opportunity to learn and grow. And that has been sort of the theme of my life, aside from serendipitous moments of running into people, which is the point of my next story. But I was going through some work challenges at a new site as a contracting SLP working for an agency, and I was starting at a new district. And I was this is many, many years ago, just shortly after my CF, and I was working with an occupational therapist. And while I was orienting myself to the new district and the new staff and all the things that you have to sort of navigate as you start a new job, all those pressures, all those overwhelming things that you have to get to know, a challenge struck where there were professionals on the team who didn't quite know me yet that had actually created ideas and beliefs about me. And these ideas started to circulate in communication at this particular school site in this district. And one of the people that had these beliefs or values did confront me about it and shared how they were feeling, which I was so appreciative of. But immediately I went into that place that we all do when we're sort of triggered or we're thrown off guard and we have the stimulus hit us that we're not prepared for. And I became reactive. And I was reactive. And in my reactivity, my emotions had gotten the best of me. And when that happens, we can kind of go down this road of saying things or doing things that we might regret later. And I remember I went to my car and I was crying and I was so upset and I was in this victim mentality and I was blaming others that they did this to me and they're saying this about me and they don't even know me. And it was such a pivotal experience or moment in my life. You can actually go to my website to get more of the story. But it was such a pivotal moment because while I was breaking down and emotional, and you have to understand that this was kind of happening at the beginning of the school year, and it wasn't processed immediately. So for a couple weeks on campus, I was uncomfortable. Maybe there was some fear. Maybe I had like some emotional concerns and I wasn't connecting and collaborating well with the special ed team that I needed to collaborate with to do my job successfully. So I was in my car in hysterics thinking, well, the best thing to do is quit my job. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to go somewhere else. I don't need this. I don't deserve this. How dare they mentality. And my phone rang. And I picked up my phone and it was the OT that was also new from a contracting agency, a travel agency that was starting at the school site when I was. And she was such an important person in my life in that moment because she was actually calling me to collaborate on a client. And my point in all of this is when you are hijacked by emotions or you are in difficult challenges and sort of, the world is like spinning beneath your feet or the rug's been pulled out from under you, you're not in a way that you can show up to do the things you need to do professionally. And the person is the profession. So if I'm not able to handle my emotions, that's going to come out at work. And it did. If I'm not able to be less reactive and pause and collect myself, that's going to show up at work when I'm triggered. And excuse me. So this OT, Aubrey Hathaway, she does a lot of well-being and mindfulness and all of this family ancestry work. And she called me on the phone and I said, I can't collaborate on the student that she wanted to talk about. And right in that moment, she said to me, Stephanie, stop, catch a breath. I was like, what? Huh? And she stopped my victim train like dead in its tracks. And she introduced these tidbits of mindfulness and practices to help me calm my nervous system and essentially clear my thinking so that I could show up and advocate for myself in the way that I needed to with the team at the school district. So Aubrey introduced me many, many years back to mindfulness strategies and nonviolent communication strategies, which is what our talk is about today. And since then, because of the difference that I saw in that critical moment, I didn't quit my job. I stayed in that particular assignment. I became very well bonded with the special education team. We worked together very well. We were able to be very productive and we were able to show up and really hear each other and connect on a new level because of these principles that I learned to implement in my conversations at work. And it was a practice at first, but through the years, I've seen the results and the transformation, and I've continued to deepen my practice with these styles of basically supporting a clinician, professional development and education that supports us and who we are so that we are in the right place to show up to then help others. And because I've seen this huge transition from me being in a place of constant reactivity to and emotional and acting out of just emotional responses and maybe regretting later things that I said or did or emails that I sent or ways I showed up in IEP meetings in, difficult conversations to, transitioning into this space now where I can be mindful, I can pause, I can collect myself, I can process what's going on, and then I can move forward with clarity and wisdom and confidence because I've learned the framework on how to navigate my communication. Because that communication, not only is communication life, but, we know as SLPs, SLPA, speech clinicians, that communication is what connects us in our bonds, in our relationship, in our ability to see the humanity in one another. So that changed everything. Another person in my life who she actually only worked at that school district for that year and then she left. I stayed. We've stayed in touch, but that was another important person who again has just kind of shifted me on my path to support me with where I am today. Now sharing these principles and practices with the speech clinicians that I look at and think, yes, I've been there. I've been through that. I understand that. I know what you're going through. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. And here's what we can do.
Yeah. I mean, what a pivotal moment. It's like, sitting in the car thinking, I'm going to quit. And then instead pivoting and taking that challenge, but then creating something so positive from it. And I can't imagine a single person that's listening that hasn't had that moment where we do feel like, just I can't do this anymore, or just, having those communication breakdowns. So I I love that you took that, and it's like, took that challenge and then something so wonderful came from it. So tell us, as we get started, just what is compassionate communication? So, I mean, we know what both of those words mean, but how do you define that?
Yes. So from all of the practice, and I like how you said, how do I define it? Because I do want to point out that I am sharing my interpretations, my best interpretations that I have of the nonviolent communication strategies. If you want to learn more, you can go to cnvc.org. It's the Center for Nonviolent Communication. But my interpretation of compassionate communication is really being able to give feedback and receive feedback. So listen and speak in a way that comes from the heart, in a way that you are connecting to your conscious intentions, and in a way that aligns with your values. So thinking about what your value system is. So Jennifer, what are some of your top values that you prioritize in life?
Let's say integrity, kindness, that compassion, realizing that everybody comes with their own story and not, assuming good intent, I would say, are some of my main ones.
Okay, and those are great ones. Kindness, compassion, and it's so integrity. So you want to make sure, Jennifer, when you are talking to others and you're speaking to others, that you're connecting to, that's my value system. So I want to make sure that I am intentionally, when I'm speaking to you, I'm using kindness. I'm intentionally using compassion. I'm intentionally being truthful about my word, or having integrity in my communications with you. Because what happens a lot of times is when we're not using compassionate communication. So the contrast to that is what Dr. Marshall Rosenberg calls life alienating communication. So when we're using that life alienating communication, we are disconnected from our intentions and our values, and we might communicate in a way that has blame or judgment or criticism or demands or labeling or diagnosing people, not diagnosing in the way you're thinking as an SLP would diagnose, but just making a judgment on people. And what happens is, maybe after the conversation is over, your needs are still not met. Maybe their needs are still not met. You don't feel like you got any further in the conversation. It created even more of a disconnect, this separation, which is the opposite of collaboration and what's important in our field to really be successful with the people that we're working with. So you have that life alienating communication, and then you walk away, and we all do this. I still do this. And we walk away and we think, oh man, why did I say that? That's not who I am. That's not what I'm about. That's not what I believe in. I was just in a moment. I had so much on my plate. You caught me at the wrong time. I reacted. I'm sorry, right? It sounds familiar because it's human, it's normal, and we all do it. But compassionate communication brings us back to being able, I want to hear when Jennifer talks to me, when you talk to me, I want to drop beneath the words that you are using, and I want to connect to you on a deeper level of maybe what you're feeling, what you're needing, and how I can support you, rather than going into a place of defensiveness or reactivity, or maybe even closing my ears off and not hearing you, or already be thinking about what I want to say next without even having heard what you shared.
So, and how does that differ? So I'm listening, thinking, okay, these are my values. So, what I'm hearing is, then I want to communicate with you in a line with, almost, would you say, the way that I want to be communicated with, or how is that different? I'm trying to make sure I understand. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I think I'm catching on to what you're talking about. So we're keeping it about ourselves right now. So if I'm
Okay.
thinking about myself, I want to take the focus off of you and how you're
Gotcha.
communicating or what I want
Okay.
you to say or do with me in this moment. Okay. So
Okay.
I'm removing myself from that because as children, most of us, not all of us, we were grown up. We grew up in a way where we were sort of taught that when we communicate, if something went wrong or there was a challenge, someone is to blame and someone is to be punished, right? So we have this, well, you did it and here's what's going to happen now and now you're in trouble. We didn't teach, and we were taught this language to compare me to you, or to compare, to label things. That's bad, that's good, that's ugly, right? Or to criticize, or even maybe to sort of manipulate a situation to sort of get something that we might need. So we're kind of not really being completely honest. We might be manipulating something to meet our needs. So this is our upbringing and how some of us, not all of us, have been conditioned in life. And therefore we have formed these habitual responses to come into a place of reactivity. So essentially what we're doing is we are unlearning these habitual patterns of speaking. We'll start with speaking, for example. We have to unlearn that. And it's a process, right? And when I'm doing that, I'm not necessarily thinking, and I hope this answers your question, I'm going to talk to you the way I would want you to talk to me. Because yes, maybe that's true if we're using compassionate communication, because we would want everybody communicating this way. But we're thinking about it, we are more I focused. So we're moving away from the you language. You did, you were, you have, and we're moving into the I. So that's the first thing, we're moving into the I. And then we're connecting with really showing up and being mindful. So that mindfulness comes in, that I have to be fully aware of right in this moment, what is my intention? So if I'm coming to you at a school district and you're an administrator, Jennifer, for example, and I'm buried in my caseload and my numbers are so high and I'm staying long after my day, and I'm literally seeing the effects of this emotionally, maybe physically. I'm drained. It's like affecting my work-life balance. Something needs to change. And now I want to come to you and I want to talk to you about that because I want something to change, right? So I'm coming with you with a need. So what do you think my need might be?
You need, I think, support. You need to figure out how to take some of the work off your plate, and so you can be more effective at your job and not get burned out.
You nailed it. Yes, I need support. I need help. So in that moment, if I'm going to come to you, the administrator, I have choices. I have my old habitual conditioned way of being to just kind of come and dump it on you. And like, you guys are giving us like way too many kiddos and you're not really supporting us in these areas. And you have me coming to a staffing once a month when I told you that I don't really have time for that. And my principal's making me sign up to do bus duty. I don't have time for bus duty. Is she crazy? Like, so we come in this way where we have a need. Our need is for support, but we haven't focused enough and got real clear on that. Or maybe we're very clear on that, but we haven't got clear on how to communicate that. So now administrators like, whoa, because we've got blaming language, we've got criticism, and she or he or they are on the defense, right? So they're covering their ears in a way, and they might not be able to really hear us. So what we're doing is we're learning to reframe our language to, again, pull back to our pure intention. So my intention is a need for support, and I'm going to learn how to reframe that in a way that keeps it solely about me. I'm going to be very open-hearted in doing so because I want to connect with you, Jennifer. I don't want to turn you off or push you away. I want my needs to be met, and I want your needs to be met because a win-win is going to be the best situation here, right? So now, and I'll kind of tell you what that process is, but so now I sit and I think, all right, let me go through this reframing process so I can show up to the administrator or the director and say, when I have a caseload of 73 students and 50% of those are in an STC class and I'm averaging 6 IEPs a week, I feel stressed. I feel overwhelmed. I really have a need for support. Would you be willing to provide an SLPA for me 2 days a week, 6 hours a day to see my kiddos on those days so I can tend to some of these other tasks? or, so we're going to learn a process on how to connect to what we're feeling and what we're needing. And we're going to lay it out in this way that Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, who is presently deceased, but he created the Center for Nonviolent Communication. And he's an international peacemaker. And this is a process that is used in big businesses everywhere, businesses, schools, you name it, organizations, for the simple reason that it works. And you'll find it in, I think, over 35 countries across the globe are using his process. And it's simple in nature. It's a life practice, a little harder to put into play because it's building habits, right? Like anything else. But it is available to us, and there's just so many benefits that come when we can learn to reframe our language, bringing the attention back to ourselves, coming from a place of compassion, connecting to our feelings and needs, our intentions, and our values. That's compassionate communication.
Okay, that summed it up so well. And so I really do feel like I have such a good understanding because I hear you. If you come at somebody, and we've all been on the receiving end where you feel attacked and you're never going to be able to show up as your best self, because then when you feel that way, it's very easy and natural then to attack back versus I like that idea of thinking, instead of it being, you did this, you've done that, it's more of, hey, this is what I need. Here's some potential solutions. How can we work together to make this work for both of us? And that is going to be a much more welcoming way to start a conversation than feeling like attacked. So I think, and it's, when I'm listening to you too, it sounds, I hear what you're saying completely, that this would not be an overnight switch if you're not used to this. So it sounds like it really would involve, and I know we're going to get into the framework and whatnot, but that it would really involve. And I was thinking, what would be some of the blocks? And I'm thinking, and tell me if I'm wrong, that this requires some self-awareness and some ability to say, okay, I know that I feel this way. I know that I want to react this way, but I need to not. What would you say some of the biggest blocks are to when people are trying to make this shift and have more compassionate communication?
So there's blocks that come up along the way, and it might make more sense to talk about those when we talk about each step, so people kind of have a visual for what this framework is. But you are right. The very first block is, and when you were saying this, it brought to mind, when you first start to practice this style of communication, it can almost sound, if you follow the script, which we'll share, but it can almost sound ingenuine, or it can almost sound, it doesn't always sound natural. I remember when I was first practicing this sound, and I would bring this home and talk to people, I was called out for, what are you talking about? But you have to make an intentional choice that you want to do the work, right? You want to make this shift because of all the benefits that are going to come, and we'll talk about that. But you have to bring that self-awareness, and that self-awareness at first is going to come after you've had those conversations that you regret, because you're going to walk away. And your homework really is to reflect on those conversations. And some of us do this already. Man, how could I have shown up differently? What could I have said differently? Only now you're going to apply the framework that I'm going to share with you. So initially it's that self-awareness, but it's also self-awareness on the level that, like anything else, we have to cultivate this open-heartedness, this goodness with ourselves before we can push it out onto others. So that kind of goes into negative self-talk, how we're talking to ourselves, how we're judging ourselves, how we're blaming ourselves. We do that a lot. We do it out loud to other people. We internalize it. We do it with ourselves. So that's a good place to start the practice that we'll get into, is to really look at how am I talking to myself, and silently reframing the way you talk to yourself. And then you can begin to use that verbally outwards. And again, the first step might be, conversation happened. I'm going to do some intentional reflection and think about how I could have done it differently. And next time a challenge comes, I might start to slowly think of things in the moment and pause to reframe how I am speaking. And then over time, it will start to become a little bit more natural. I do tell people with this process, start with your emails, start with your text messages, because it's not already out there until you hit the send button.
Yeah.
So you do have time to, don't be in a hurry. And if you are in a hurry, then that should tell you something too, because we do want to be intentional. We want to make sure that what we are sharing is going to be well received. It's going to get us good outcomes, that it's going to make work a better place. Like, I want to bring joy into work and happiness, and I want to collaborate and connect well with others in a good way. I mean, that's my goal, because, and these compassionate communication strategies are one way to do that. So if you're open-minded, that releases that block. And if you're willing to reflect, that's going to give you that opportunity to sort of practice before you are verbal out loud. Those are some of the blocks that I think, and I would say one of the blocks is when we are listening. So know that the strategy I share, we're going to also turn the tables and we're going to be listening. So one of the blocks that might happen is we go into, it's our reptilian brain of fight, flight, freeze, but when somebody is coming at us with words, we can be blocked from being compassionate and kind. And we're not able to show up because we're in a place of defensiveness. So like you said, I'm going to hurt you. Or we internalize it. You said something to me like, wow, you weren't very dependable. I really needed you in that moment and you weren't there. So instead of me hurting you back, like, well, you're never dependable. Look at when you, or me hurting me. Jennifer doesn't think I'm dependable. I'm this awful person. And then I take that and do whatever with that, right? That painful moment that I've internalized. So, there's so much separation and division in our world as it is. If we even just look at, like you said, it's spring. This is a great time for compassionate communication. You're right. This is a time for fresh new beginnings. Look at our world that we're in and the constant war in, with Ukraine and Russia, and look at the great racial divide and the social injustices that are out there. All of these things, the anti-Semitism, all of these things that are happening that keep people divided for whatever reasons. We all come from our own backgrounds and beliefs, and we all have our own value systems. But a lot of times it stems down to fear or feeling threatened, and this creates separation. So if we have a tool that we can use to do the opposite of separation, which is deepen our connections and collaborate, and we can feel like we are members of a group where we belong, where our humanity and goodness is seen, then we want to remember that as our why when we get blocked, when people are saying things to us and we want to naturally go into that fight, flight, freeze mode.
Well, yes, I could spend a lot of time just even unpacking what you just said, but I want to make sure that we really talk about these 4 steps of the compassionate communication framework, because I think this will be so helpful and give listeners something that they can at least have an overview. And then again, we can let them know where they can get more information. But tell us a little bit about these 4 steps and how we can use them to reframe our language when we are collaborating, which we do all the time as SLPs.
Yes. Okay. So I can say the 4 steps really simply. And if the listeners were going to memorize anything, this would be the piece to memorize. So the 4 steps are: number 1, observation; number 2, feelings; number 3, needs; number 4, requests. And if we look at that a little more deeply, number 1 is observation. So what we're doing is we're moving away from evaluations or our opinions of things, and we're going back to being objective. So we are looking at something. So the sentence frame that we would use is: when I hear, when I see, when you say, and I'm going to tell you why we could say you. So if I were to can you give me an example? Were you working with students today, or is there a conversation that comes up to your mind or something that you heard that you would want to tell me about in a sentence?
That would need compassionate communication?
No,
or
just
that
tell me
just
something that you noticed today with one of your clients.
Okay, I would say, because I typically work with babies, so but their parents are a big part of that as well. So I could say when, something I observed was a baby that I've worked with, and it's like, I need, this is a step I want you to take that's going to be supportive to this baby's motor development. And it wasn't being followed through, but I just observed that.
Okay. So you're telling me, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is maybe your observation mixed with an opinion or an evaluation. So when I hear you say, I gave a strategy that wasn't really being followed through with, that type of statement is not quite an observation. That is your opinion that you think it wasn't being followed through with. Perhaps there could be room for argument, which is this is where these strategies are good for conflict negotiation, because we all see things differently. And maybe mom thought she was following steps to the T, right? So we could turn around and turn that statement into an observation and say, I noticed that the first 2 steps of my strategy, and whatever that was, like, I don't know what your strategy is, and you would name them, did not happen, for example. So let me give you a little more clear example. So say you tell mom, all right, when you're getting ready to give a snack option to your child, I want you to say eat on their device. I want you to tap eat each time you offer something, eat. And now if I said to you, oh, Jennifer, I gave mom a strategy, but I went in today and I didn't really see her following through on it. That's an observation. So me telling you that statement is an observation. It's my, it's an evaluation. It's my opinion of what I think happened. An observation would look like, so Jennifer, I went into the parent's house and I told the mom, each time you offer food, please tap eat on the device, and mom only tapped eat 2 times of the 5 times she offered food. So now instead of saying, she didn't really follow through, which is an opinion or an evaluation of mom and what she's doing, right? I've now made that objective. Mom only said eat on the iPad 2 times of the 5 times she presented food to her child. So now it's a very clear objective. So Marshall Rosenberg says when we can, there's a quote, J. Krishnamurti, he actually says, observing without putting our own evaluation is the highest form of human intelligence. He's an Indian philosopher. So being able to observe something without putting our evaluation to it is the highest form of human intelligence. So again, when we're going into these IEP meetings and we're saying to mom, well, I didn't really see that this was practiced, versus this was only practiced 2 nights of the 5 that I assigned it, it takes away some of that judgment. It takes some away that defensiveness of mom thinking, did I not do a good job? And it just states the facts. So that's observation. Okay. If we were to roll into step 2, we would go into feelings. Now, we're talking about universal feelings, and these are important because it's something that you and I should be able to relate to on some level. And we're separating feelings from, again, evaluations or statements that should be think. For example, I feel like mom isn't modeling core words. So I could change it to, I think mom isn't modeling core words, but that's not a feeling. So we're connecting to these universal feelings. I feel worried that mom. I feel concerned that mom. So step 2 is really getting clear on connecting what's going on with you, what your feeling is in that moment. And when we can connect to a universal feeling, and I can share that with you or pretend you're mom, hey mom, when I see you model eat 2 times, but you offer the food 5 times, I feel a little worried. Okay, so now I'm connecting it back to me. I feel a little worried. Mom knows what it's like to feel worried. You know, Jennifer, what it's like to feel worried. Our listeners have been there too. So it's something we can all relate to. So that would be the feeling, and it's my feeling. And then
let me back up for just a second before we move on to the third.
Yes.
When we're going through these, I mean, this would so let's continue with the example of the mom. We observe, we said, and again, I like the idea. The observation is black and white. It's just like data. There's no opinion, just data. So is this, when we're going through these, this is almost, the steps that we would take in order for each one of these interactions or communication events. So we're going to observe, again, black and white. And then once we have the observation, we are going to think to ourselves, what is the feeling that I'm feeling when I see this observation? So it could even be something that, wow, I observed that, 2 out of the 5 times this was done. I feel like I didn't do a very good job explaining that, or I feel we want to not necessarily stick to that, but really just emotion. So I feel it could be worried. I feel, could you say inadequate? So it's very much an emotion tied to that second piece.
So yes, these are universal feelings, and I can share where at the end where you can get some of those word banks. But yes, these are universal feelings, and we don't have time to get into this today, but Dr. Marshall Rosenberg unlayers that even more with feelings, and he talks about not using feeling words that, for example, would create some kind of blame on somebody else. So if I said to you, Jennifer, if I'm talking about, you left the house today, I feel abandoned. A word like abandoned or isolated kind of insinuates that someone did something to me. So we want to take away feeling words where someone did something to me. And we want to really focus on universal feelings, yes, that keep it about ourselves, and ones that, humanity shares that we can all relate to, so that when we are communicating our messages, it's understood. It's very clear. And you brought up a good point. I'm trying to think what it was. So you said, we're almost going to follow this in order. So I would say initially, as you are learning this process, you can follow this in order. Yes, because again, remember, you're going to be reflecting on something that already happened after the fact, and you can go through this process. You're going to be looking at your emails before you send them, and you can go through this process. As you become more comfortable and fluent, like learning another language and fluent in this, you won't need to be so rigid with it. You'll find that you can sit there and connect to your feeling. And then from your feeling, you're like, well, why am I feeling this way? Oh, it's because I have a need for this. Well, how do I know? Because I've got all this other stuff going on. And, all the pieces are there like a puzzle. But right now, yes, keep it simple and start with this order. Because what happens with feelings are when we can connect to our feelings, Dr. Marshall Rosenberg says that all feelings stem from a met or unmet need. We can connect them back. So if we're feeling good, maybe our need for fun was met. If we're feeling happy, maybe our need for well-being was met today. But if we're feeling angry, maybe our need for support was not met. Or if we're feeling frustrated, maybe our need for, and fill in the blank here, was not met, right? So you start to realize that these feelings are an emotional intelligence that lead us to what it is that we want. And this is where a lot of the conflict happens, is communicating people's strategies to get their needs met, is where we have a lot of these power struggles, a lot of the challenging, conflicting conversations, those IEP meetings that go on and on and on in part 2 and 3 and 4, because we're not connecting to the needs. It's about meeting the needs. It's one of the most important pieces.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So we've got, and I do like to think of this as like anything, it's a practice. So like you said in the beginning, like anytime we learn a new skill, in the beginning, we do have to be more, step 1, step 2, but as it becomes, part of as those changes are made, and it's just, I see what you're saying, where you don't have to think like step 1, step 2. Okay,
yes, so it's like articulation, right? Yes. We really focus on that first step of lifting that tongue for that sound. And then eventually we've got it flowing in conversational speech.
No, and that's a great way for especially SLPs to think of it. So, so let's go to step 3. So we've got observation, feeling. What's step 3?
So step 3 is the need.
Okay.
So, So we've unlayered past our feeling to connect to what it is that, and in most challenging, conflicting conversations, it's because there's unmet needs, not needs met, right?
Okay.
So we have these unmet needs, and we hone in on those. And there's a category, Marshall Rosenberg gives a nice little category that different needs fall under, but it might be a need for independence. It might be a need for things that have to do with, food, air, shelter, water, like things that there's all these different categories of needs that we have, but he calls them universal needs nonetheless. And again, because it's something that you and I can relate to as the level of a need. So that's pretty cut and dry. So if I said to you, like I said to you earlier, I was kind of telling you if I went to the administrator and I had all these problems, what do you think my need is? So we're the same as when we're speaking our needs. We're also flipping that and trying to listen to others. And when I hear others speak to me and things that they're saying, can I unlayer that and connect to what they might be feeling and they might be needing? And if I can connect to universal feelings and needs, I can give empathy because I understand that, because I've been there and I know what that feels like. And that doesn't feel good.
Okay, so let's stick to that same example with the mom. So we've got, we've got what we observed. We've got, let's stick with the feeling of worried. So when I see this, I feel worried. And then what would the need be?
Okay, so there's no right or wrong answer to this. There could be a ton of different needs, but as an SLP, I might have a need for order, things to flow a certain way. I might have a need for enrichment to the quality of life for my student. And they'll, this will enrich their quality of life if they're now able to independently ask for food, for example. Or I might have a need for more support from mom. So that just requires that introspection. So we could just pretend for the sake of this example, I now say to mom, hey, mom, so when I see that, I know how to frame it differently now, but I'm going to back it up to our statements. When I see you offering child food and out of the 5 times you offered food, you modeled eat 2 times, I feel worried. I have a need for more practice. Okay, and so there it is. So in that case, maybe I just have a need for the child to have more practice because I want more motor planning, right? So I have a need for, and I use their name, to have more practice opportunities. That might be my need. Okay, so I connect with mom in that way. Now, I've established my need, whatever that need is, support, enrichment, etc. Order, this is the way I do things in order for the motor planning to really start to click in, whatever it might be. Now I move on to my request because if we're in a situation where we have unmet needs and we're feeling certain ways, that's not going to go away, right? Some people will try to suppress their feelings, which I wouldn't recommend. So we want to acknowledge the experience, the feelings, what we're having, connect to what we're needing, but we need to be able to ask for it. Just like we wouldn't want to stay in a job where our salary is really low if we're really feeling frustrated because we have a need for more money, right? We have a need to grow our finances. So we're not going to stay quiet and just, bear that burden. Hopefully not. We need to advocate for ourselves. We need to ask for what we're needing so we're not feeling this way anymore, right? We need to move past this. So Marshall Rosenberg says we request as a way to enrich life. So these are not demands. So he says, kind of like how we said observations are not evaluations, right? Requests are not demands. So a request is something I'm going to ask of you that will enrich the quality of life. Okay, so keeping that in mind, he says that requests need to be clear, they need to be positive, and they need to be actionable, not vague. We don't want anybody trying to interpret, because if I said to you, I really need help, would you help me? Maybe your idea of helping me is not what I needed. And I'm still running around saying, Jennifer did not help me. And you're like, what's she talking about? I totally helped her. I gave her, X, Y, and Z. So we would want to approach mom in this way in our example. And I would want to be clear and positive and actionable. I would say, I have a need for support, for multiple providers, for more opportunities. Would you be willing to model the word eat on that GoTalk device every time you present a food item? We can ask, because I know a lot of listeners' heads go to, well, yeah, it doesn't mean they're going to do it. Correct.
Yeah.
But we're talking about framing language in a way that people will receive us, in a way that people understand us, in a way that we can get our needs met in a positive, compassionate, empathetic way. So the importance of now knowing it's a request versus a demand is how mom responds to my request. So mom says, yes, great, we're all moving on. If mom says, I don't have time for that, I'm so busy, I got to be helping this kid with that and this with that, and no, I'm good to X, Y, and Z. if we respond in a way that we punish mom, we blame mom, we criticize mom or judge mom, then it's not really a request to enrich life. It becomes a demand. Well, if you don't do this, I'm not coming to your house anymore to support you. I'm not going to take all this time to build all these beautiful handouts for you on strategies. You're just throwing them out anyways. You know, that's a form of punishment. Or thinking in your mind, oh, this mom is so unsupportive, or running to your colleague and expressing your frustration about what a terrible mom is. These are no longer requests. So the person you're asking always has the right to say no, but we need to look at how we are responding to their response. And the best collaboration happens. The best conflict is resolved when mom's needs are met and my needs are met. So if mom says no to me, can I bring the same framework to her and say, okay, let's talk about that. How are you feeling right now? I'm frustrated. I have all this going on. What are you needing right now? I need support of my own. Okay, sounds like you're needing support. I'm needing support. Let's now strategize ways that both of our needs are going to be met. You're telling me you can at least do it maybe 2 times out of the day. Let's see, is there anybody else in your house? And then you sit down and you problem solve. Are there other people that come over? Other people that can model this word? And you're working together. That's the collaboration. To not prioritize my need that mom needs to do this, but we're prioritizing everybody's needs. Mom has a need for ease in her life. She is busy. She is like, her cup is overflowing, right? Or mom has a need for respect. You need to respect that this is my answer right now. Or mom has a need for whatever her needs are. We're coming to the table ready to try to support everybody's needs and strategize ways to meet those needs that are healthy and positive and clear and actionable, that are going to enrich the quality of life for everybody as best as we can, and in a way that comes back to aligning with our intentions and our values.
Well, and I think too, I mean, what that does also is, I mean, you want to set up a situation in which the parent's not saying, oh, yeah, I'll do that, knowing I can't, I'm not going to be able to do that, but I'm just going to say this. That's not a win-win either, you know, because again, that's not helping either person. Both are not getting exactly what they need in that moment. So,
yes.
So I think, you know, modeling that and setting that up in such a way, it creates a safe place where people know that, hey, I you know, I'm not going to just tell you what you want to hear, and, you know, vice versa. So I think that's
a
great.
Good point you bring up, because mom could very well just be trying to get through the moment and yes, I'll do this. But what we can do to connect on that deeper level, in that example that you gave, that's a great example, is we can stop and we can do a little reflection and say, all right, mom, what do you honestly think? And we want to frame it that we're very clear the same way. What do you think about modeling that core word eat each time you present food? How do you feel about that? What are you needing with all of this? So again, we reiterate it very clear, but we also open a window for some vulnerability, for them to share their feelings, for their truth, so we can kind of continue to support them in whatever way that they may need it.
Yeah.
And the student, the child.
Yeah. And I think, you know, just keeping in mind throughout all of it, it's very easy to get in these power struggles where it's you. And, you know, well, if you wanted your child to get better, you would do this. But I think at the end of the day, if we just remember that there is one goal, which is to help whomever it is on the other end that you're trying, you're having these conversations for. So, okay. So let's do some role playing so we can really just kind of see this in action, because I think that would help.
Sure. So why don't we do one as you're a speaker and one as you're a listener?
Okay, let's do it.
Do you want to try that?
Sure.
Okay. So let's talk about one where you are a speaker and you're not using this compassionate communication strategy because you haven't learned it. And I want you to come to me. What setting are you in, Jennifer?
So I do early intervention and babies coming out of the NICU.
Oh, wow. Beautiful. Okay. So are you in the hospitals for that?
Homes. Like, so as soon as
Go
they're
into
discharged.
homes once they are coming out of the NICU, not while they're in the NICU. Okay.
Correct.
So you're going into homes. So I want you to, and this is obviously for our listeners, this is just a made up story, but I want you, knowing that, because you know about that, why don't you pretend I'm your friend and or somebody you live with, and you, excuse me, you come home and you want to tell me about maybe just something awful that happened to you on your workday.
That, like,
just a couple sentences about what's going on for you, and you're just going to express, you're just going to lay it all out. You just got home and, oh man, this has been challenging. You get home and you're ready to just dump it on somebody. I'll be your somebody.
Okay. All right. So, it's so frustrating today because I have this appointment set up every single Tuesday at 9:00, and I get there and they're getting ready to leave. And so I drove all the way there, and then I just ended up sitting in a parking lot, wasting my time instead of seeing this child that I have scheduled all the time. And Mom knows that we have this set aside every single week at this time.
Yeah. Okay. So if I were to unlayer that and listen to your story, I could connect to that you had an appointment. You were supposed to be at that appointment at a set time. You showed up at set time, but Mom was walking out of the door with the person you had the appointment with. Okay, so I'd say, wow. So I'm processing all of that. That's all the observational piece that I'm processing from what you're saying. And if I would say to you, so are you feeling frustrated right now?
Yes, I'm so frustrated. It was a complete waste of my time.
Okay. So are you having a need for more respect of your time?
Yes, I met my end of the bargain and was there at our agreed upon time. So yeah, I feel like my time isn't being respected.
Okay. So it sounds like you're frustrated. It sounds like you're really needing support from the mom. You're needing understanding from the mom, respect for the schedule, respect for your time. So let's take that situation now. And if we were going to work together and I'm your friend and I said to you, all right, well, let's talk to Mom about that. Let's figure out a way that we could, try to meet your need for respect or for order or for acknowledging, the schedule. So compliance to the schedule. How could we frame that using the 4-step process?
Okay, so now I'm talking with the mom.
You'll talk to Mom.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, and guide me along the way I'll, you want me to do what I think, just from what I've learned thus far, how I could incorporate those.
Yes. No judgment whatsoever. This is just your very, very first practice on the spot.
Okay. I got this. Okay.
Because imagine you've come home now, and this is what we want our listeners to do. I want you to reflect on this, and I want to have this conversation with Mom because my needs are not being met, and I'm having these serious feelings. So something needs to change. But in order to change it, maybe Mom this happens time and time again.
Yeah.
So you need to find a way to self-advocate and show up and talk to Mom, but you don't want to turn Mom off, turn her away, frustrate her. You want to keep that great bond that you guys have and that connection. So let's kind of talk through the 4-step process on what you could say to Mom.
Okay. So, Mom, I observe that when we have our appointments scheduled every Tuesday at 9, sometimes you're there and ready to go, and there are other times where you are not. And for example, last week when I showed up and you were walking out as I arrived, we weren't able to have our scheduled session.
Okay, let's stop right there.
Okay.
So that's the observation. And I would say tighten that up even more, because when you say, which was a great job, by the way, very good job. When you say, Mom, there's sometimes you're there and sometimes you're not, that is not objective. And it could leave Mom to think, what are you talking about? I've missed one session. And she could go on to the defense. So this is why we practice. So we want to come from a place and say, Mom, when I came over in March on the 1st, 3rd, and 15th at 9 p.m., you had left. Or mom, out of the 8 scheduled sessions at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, for 6 of them, you were not available. Or we were not able to have our session.
Yeah.
So we want to just hone in on black and white specific.
Okay.
Yes. And this is why we practice, because yes, then mom might say, oh, wait, was it 6? Or, it's more specific. Like, she's not going to go on to the defense like she's feeling judged. You're just saying, hey, out of these, like, 4 out of 6 appointments, this is what happened. So we're being very clear. So let's go on to the next step. And again, we can always start with, and you did, when I observe. You said, I observed. So you could also say, when I see that in 3 out of the 5 appointments at 9 a.m., you are not home. Okay, let's go on to the next step.
Feelings. Okay. I feel... Okay, let me just think for a second, because this is exactly why I'm practicing. Okay, so...
And that's what you want to do. You want to be intentional. Really connect to your feeling.
Yes. So I feel... Because I feel like it's so easy to always say frustrated. Because that's...
But if that's how you're feeling, that's okay.
Okay. I feel frustrated that I arrive at our scheduled appointments and you're not home.
Okay. And you can even simplify more and just say, I feel frustrated. You don't even have to keep going. Yep.
Okay.
When I come to 2 out of the 4 appointments and you're not here, I feel frustrated. And you can just cut it right there to really keep it simplified. Because again, it's about you and you're practicing. And when we know we're practicing, less is more. Keep it simple. I feel frustrated. Okay. So now you're unlayering that frustration. You're saying to yourself, Jennifer, why do I get frustrated? Because, maybe Stephanie, when Stephanie shows up to her scheduled appointments and the parents aren't there, she is so excited. She's like, oh, this gives me 10 minutes to do a meditation in my car before I go in. Yes. You know what I mean? Like, so everybody kind of sees things differently. So let's kind of unlayer what your need is from that frustration.
Okay. So I need communication from you if you're not going to be able to keep your scheduled appointments.
Perfect.
On the days we have them.
Okay. Now, do you feel that was actionable? What action will mom take? Did you specify what action she would need to take?
I need you to call or text me the morning of to let me know that you will not be home before I drive to our appointment.
Yes. Very good. And it's very detailed. And it's positive. It's very positive. It's very clear. She's got to pick up the phone. She's got to call you. It's got to be at this specific time of the day to tell you she's not coming. So now, very good job. So now mom says, oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Right. Sure, Jennifer. How can you ask a follow-up question to make sure that she understood the clear, actionable, positive request?
Are there any roadblocks you see right now, or any reason that you feel like you wouldn't be able to call or text me the morning of to let me know?
Good. And you repeated the morning of to let me know. Great. So you're connecting with her. And again, if you want to even simplify it further, we can just connect to, how do you feel about calling me the morning of your scheduled appointment, the day of your scheduled appointment, to let me know you're not coming? Is that something you can do? Do you need any support with that? How are you feeling about that? Because what we're doing now is we've made our need very clear. We need communication. We need to know. We need to plan our day. So we need that respect. But what does mom need in that moment? Because she might say, oh, you know what? Sometimes that's really hard. My morning just flies by and I didn't realize I had something on the calendar. And then I thought, oh, I got to hurry up and get to that. And I totally lose track and lose sight of our time together. Jennifer, I'm so sorry. And you could say, how can I
help you? How can I help you be successful with this?
Yes, exactly. Okay. So we just turn the table back after our request. We say, how do you feel about it? What are
Okay.
you needing? How can I support you? And those
Okay.
are the three. I have all of this that we kind
Mm-hmm.
of went over. I created a compassionate communication in the workplace workbook, and it
Oh,
has this
okay.
layout of the 4 steps. It has a little background about compassionate communication
Mm-hmm.
and mindfulness. It's got some practice examples for each step
Mm-hmm.
along the way. And it has word banks for feelings and needs so that you can start to practice with those
Mm-hmm.
as a means to simplify your practice in the beginning. You can look in your chart and say, oh, yeah, I definitely feel that. And you can draw out that feeling, or I definitely need that. So you can ensure that these are universal feelings and needs from the
Mm-hmm.
start of your new habit that you're forming. And this compassionate communication in the workplace workbook is available on my Instagram. You don't need to have
Mm-hmm.
Instagram to have access to it, but my Instagram handle is golden.state.slp.
Mm-hmm.
And in the link in my bio, you will see the link for downloading this compassionate communication workbook. So if anybody is interested
Mm-hmm.
in reflecting on a conversation that's already happened and how could I have said that using this
Yeah.
process, or I'm about to send this important email to my boss to ask for a raise, how should I word it? Or I really have this coworker that I can't work with anymore, but I don't want to seem complaining and judgy, but something needs to change. How can I communicate this to my program specialist or my principal? You can follow that framework and use those word banks to support you in your start with your communication.
Well, I swear, Stephanie, I feel like I could just, I know you do. This is just a very like an overview of all of this. So, what I
Yes.
want to leave our listeners with now, because and I am going to also go download that as well. So, this, I could see it being useful in work settings, with relationships, just in life. I could see this being so helpful, and it is a practice, because even like going through that, I could see, oh wow, you would need to practice this. So it'd be great to even have an accountability partner or somebody to do this with. But okay, what if somebody, and we're going to put all the ways to connect, and get the information in the show notes, so listeners don't feel like you have to. We'll put all of that there, and ways that you can find information from Stephanie Michele and all of the downloads, and where can they find more information? I mean, so I know you have the downloads, and you also, do you do this as a full course as well?
So I do have full courses that are out
Mhm.
there and available. If you go to goldenstateofmindpd.com, this is my website for
Mhm.
professional development. I've also shared professional development through professional development websites, through
Okay.
podcasts.
Mhm.
I shared with you my Instagram. I am
Yeah.
also on LinkedIn at Stephanie Michele Sweigart. So that's the
Mhm.
first, a middle, and last name there. So you can find me to connect on there as well.
Mhm.
And if you go into my link tree in my bio on Instagram, you'll see a lot
Mhm.
of different free resources that I am
Okay.
offering to support the clinician with mindfulness and well-being, as
Mhm.
well as compassion based practices. So to support you in your role.
Mhm.
But as you mentioned, this is a practice for anybody. So anybody that's
Yeah.
listening, even if you're not an SLP or an SLPA,
Mhm.
that's okay. I recently gave this 2.5 hour course, a deep
Mhm.
dive into this 2.5 hour course on compassionate communication. And I loved some of the feedback. One of the feedbacks was, oh, this would be great for, I think administrators need this. And I think our directors need this. And maybe even our spouses too, haha. Because it's true. This is the type of
Mhm.
communication that everybody can benefit from. But I do want to tell
Mhm.
you this. Not everybody has learned this. Not everybody is open to using this. But
Yeah.
you, the listener, are 100% responsible
Mhm.
for your experience, whatever that experience may be. So I strongly urge you that if you learn these practices and you begin to implement them, that you allow people who have not, that you give them grace for not knowing these communication styles, and that you are patient. And now that you know better, you choose to do better and unlayer what they are saying and try to connect to what they are feeling and what they are needing. And I guarantee you, if you can connect to that, you can connect to them.
Yeah, that was so beautifully said. And I was just thinking too, I mean, yes, to all the settings. I was even thinking with my own family. I was like, okay, yes, I need to go look at that. But also, yes, you by modeling this, and not in a, well, did you see how I did that? But by modeling it, I think it really does have an impact. And you show others of ways that they can communicate in a way that doesn't feel like it's, you know, being judgy or blaming. You're modeling these, and whether it's to families, other colleagues, whomever. So I love this, and we'll put your LinkedIn, your Instagram, the website, all of that will be in the show notes so that people can find
Thank you, Jennifer.
This information. So thank you for the work that you do. Thank you, Sarah, for encouraging Stephanie to become an SLP, and then for
Aubrey.
Yes, and Aubrey. So yes, so thanks those for those moments of serendipity. But appreciate and have learned so much from you, and I feel like it's just barely dipped my toe in, and I can't wait to go and get some more information from your sources. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you so much for your time and all that you're doing as well. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I had a great time.
And that wraps up this episode. Thank you for tuning into SLP Full Disclosure. For more information about this episode, check out the show notes on our website at medtravelers.com/SLP Full Disclosure. And don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so you never miss a guest. Are you interested in becoming a travel SLP? Visit medtravelers.com to learn more and explore the exciting opportunities we offer at top-level facilities across the country. Also, a special thanks to Jonathan Carey for producing this episode and Aiden Dykes for the music and editing. And as always, this episode was powered by Med Travelers. See you next time.